Daniel, what's your take on what's going to happen with Mikel Arteta? Because you were tweeting the other day that essentially it's a dream scenario for him to come in where there's not that much expectation, and all of a sudden he's managed to turn that dream into a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah, I think that he got an unbelievable opportunity because there wasn't a lot of pressure on results at all when he got the job, because Arsenal weren't going to qualify for the Champions League and they weren't going to go down. So what I expected him to do was to take 6 months to have a look at the squad and to just quite quickly actually think, well, identify which players he felt he could go forward with and which players he felt may or may not be good players, but that weren't going to fit where he was going to go. So the best example, I think, is Alexandre Lacazette, who is an all right player. He's not terrible, but he's quite old, he's quite slow, and seemed to me like precisely the kind of player that Arteta was going to not require going forward, because where Arsenal want to get to, Lacazette is not going to take them there. And I thought that he would probably be frozen out, more or less, or used as a substitute. But he played loads at the end of last season, and he's still playing loads now. And I think the same with Granit Xhaka as another one. Arteta was given every excuse to never have to look at him again, and he brought him back. And I understand that he may have felt that he didn't have better players in the club at the time, but the point wasn't really about at the time. The point was about building something to go somewhere. And Arteta hasn't really done that at all. And I'm absolutely certain that the board are desperate not to sack him, because they only sacked Unai Emery just over a year ago, and they put all their eggs in the Arteta basket. But when you actually break down the appointment of Arteta, it is absolutely baffling, and I totally understand why they did it. He was someone they felt was Arsenal. He played for Arsenal, but the reality is that he wasn't even a good player at Arsenal particularly. He was an all right player. They panic bought at the end of a transfer window, who did okay, who wasn't a terrible player, just wasn't a particularly good player. So he doesn't have the cachet to attract players to the club. He doesn't have the aura to inspire people who care about the club. And he doesn't have any experience. So he'd been assistant to Pep Guardiola, but being assistant to Pep Guardiola at Manchester City, the richest club perhaps in world football, maybe the second richest club at world football, who buy players and players and players and players, and not only that, but who were putting in place a structure for Guardiola in terms of the players, the men around him, and also the players that they were buying for years before Guardiola arrived. That is not similar to turning up at Arsenal and being dumped in the middle of that squad on your own. And there is no reason to think that he was going to be able to do this. He might be able to do it because lots of people think Arteta's good. Lots of people that know Arteta personally think that he's good. But the most anyone could really say about Arteta was no idea. When Josh Kroenke appointed him, and he must have gone home and said to his mum, I've appointed a new manager of Arsenal. And his mum would have said, is he any good? And Kroenke, the best he could have done would be, I don't know. And that's really what we're seeing. Like, the Arsenal job was a huge job. They're an absolute mess. They had some really good young players, but most of them weren't ready yet. They had some decent-ish old players, and then a lot of nonsense in the middle. And he didn't take the time to weed out the quality from the nonsense when he had it. And now that's what we're seeing now as a consequence of that bad decision, I think.
How do we know that he can't attract good players as a result of a mediocre playing career? Because there's only really been one opportunity for him to go out and sign a big player, and it was when Kroenke wrote the cheque for Thomas Partey on transfer deadline day, and he went out and got him. Like, is there evidence out there to suggest that players have actually turned down Arsenal because of Arteta?
I'm not saying that he can't. That like no good player is going to sign for Arsenal. What I'm saying is players signing for Arsenal because of Mikel Arteta, or players being inspired because of Mikel Arteta, his playing career is not going to achieve that, which means he's got to do a lot of salesmanship. I mean, the most obvious comparison, and it's not a similar scenario to the one Ole Gunnar Solskjaer inherited at United, because Ole's just got way better players and more money. And so if you're going to compare the two, you would have to make that obvious comparison that makes them a non-comparison. But Ole has some cachet that Arteta doesn't have. So if you're a Manchester United centre-forward and you're being coached how to finish by Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, or if you're a striker and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer says, I will help you work on your finishing, or whatever it might be, there is a level of aura and a level of cachet there. Like quite early on when things went really well under Ole, Marcus Rashford's finishing, was something that he said he'd been working on. And I remember Rashford tweeted a picture of a mortar board hat and him and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, for example. Now, that kind of stuff won't necessarily work in the long term, and it may even be a load of nonsense in the short term. But it's there that you're being managed by a club legend. So if you're bothered about United, then you could find it in yourself to find Ole Gunnar Solskjaer inspirational. And Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is also a really good player. And if he plays in your position, again, you could think, well, he's actually got a lot to teach me about how to play my role. And I'm just saying that Arteta doesn't have that. It doesn't mean that he can't sign good players. If you pay enough for them, you can sign good players. But what I'm saying is he doesn't bring any additional aura or cachet on top of the cachet that Arsenal have or don't have, depending on what you think about Arsenal.
Did they not kind of have that with Freddie Ljungberg when he took over from Unai Emery and things didn't exactly get that much better? Granted, it was only a few weeks, but I think there wasn't actually a noticeable improvement under him. The players didn't seem to respond to one of the great wingers that Arsenal have had in the last 20 years. I'm just not sure how a mediocre playing career is going to hold him back as a great manager. I get the idea of the appeal, potentially.
Isn't the issue that he's not a great manager?
I'm not saying it's not going to hold him back if he's a great manager, but when you look at managers, they all bring different things, right? And Arteta, I'm just saying that there's quite a long list of things Arteta does not bring. So he's got no managerial experience. That's obviously the biggest one. And to then be there's no other industry in the world almost where someone with Arteta's level of experience will get the top job at an Arsenal-sized institution. So he doesn't have cachet, he doesn't have aura, he doesn't have experience. So when you could identify one of those and go, well, he had that and he didn't work, or he didn't have that. But when you put them all together and you put together the mess at Arsenal, it's not a recipe for success. That's what I'm saying. So, and again, we're talking about Ole. So if you look at Ole didn't have lots of experience, but United appointed him after he'd done a stint of actually doing that job. And he'd also managed at Mould, and people laugh at that, but he'd taken a team that never won the league in its history, in like 90 years or something, history, to 2 league titles. So there is some level of experience there that makes you think he has got some ability to do this job. Whereas with Arteta, what is the evidence that he was able to do this job? What is it?
Well, none. I mean, he's been an assistant to Pep, and so you hope that he's touched the hem of the garment of the genius. So what do Arsenal do now, though? Because Edu's come out and backed him, and so, okay, that maybe that lasts 2 or 3 weeks if results don't pick up. They're currently 5 points clear of Fulham, who are propping up at the top of the relegation table at the moment. Do they have to just give him time and ride this season out and hope that there is enough managerial genius in there to recover from this? Or is it a lost cause? Like, at what point does it become a lost cause?
I don't think it's a lost cause. I mean, I think the problem with Arsenal ultimately is their ambition as a club is not matched by their ambition in the boardroom, because the best measurement, the best indicator of which club's going to do well is how much money they spend. And Arsenal aren't prepared to spend the money that the rest of the clubs are going to spend, and they don't happen to have the natural resources that a lot of other clubs have at this time. So if you look at United, for example, they also have owners who want to take money out and not put money in. It just so happens that they've got 2 brilliant centre forwards produced by the youth system. So it's not a coincidence, because obviously the measures were put in place to do that. But when that happens, you suddenly have money that you can spend. The money that you can spend in other areas, because the most crucial part of any football team, scoring goals, is not totally taken care of. But you've got two players that cost you nothing that are good at attacking. So Mason Greenwood and Marcus Rashford. Arsenal didn't have that, and so you look at Arsenal's squad and think, in order to get into the top 4, in order to challenge for the title, what is it going to take, and how on earth are they going to get there? And they could have any manager in the world who would be struggling to make something decent out of this squad. But at the same time, under Arteta, it's not really possible to be doing any worse with this squad. And so that's the tension. I think that I'm absolutely certain that the board want to stick with Arteta, and he'll get much more slack than Unai Emery did, and much more slack than almost every other manager did, because they will understand that they were taking a gamble. If you give someone who's never managed a job, then you've got to assume they're going to be learning as they go. And when Pep Guardiola got the job at Barcelona, he had maybe the greatest player ever and almost definitely the greatest midfield ever. And that sort of eases your way in slightly. But if you parachute someone into a mess, then you've got to expect them to take time to sift through it. So I'm not sure that they'll keep him, because things could still get worse from here. But like Southampton, I think they're playing Southampton tomorrow night. That's a difficult game. I mean, you would back Southampton to take care of that. And if they lose again and again and again, then they might have to do something. But I definitely think he'll get quite a bit more rope, because what are they going to do next? Like, who are you going to go and get now? And what is that person that they're going to do now going to make of the squad that they inherit? And also, if Arsenal to go and sack Arteta and point, say, Allegri's not going to be happy with this squad, and he's going to want money, whereas Arteta is presumably more grateful for the opportunity and therefore less demanding.
Yeah, it's not a great scenario for the Arsenal fans in our midst. I did want to ask you about Manchester United and City at the weekend. It's the perfect get-right fixture for City. They've got West Brom, Manchester United, Sheffield United away. So not a bad sequence of games to come back from the match at the weekend. What was your take on the derby and why it ended up not being as entertaining or interesting a game as it could have been?
I think that for both clubs, the managers decided that they would prefer not to lose. And I think that every fan of every club, you want to go and see your team go for it, particularly in a derby game. But I think the way they would have looked at it is that, I mean, for United, for example, if they beat the bottom club on Thursday, the worst case scenario with the point that they got against City is that there'll be 5 points off the top with a game against Burnley in hand at the end of Thursday night if they can beat the bottom club. That's a pretty good place to be in. And I think that much as a supporter, I would like to have seen Ole go wild and try and win the game. If it was my responsibility and my job that was on the line, I can see why in that circumstance you deem a defeat more damaging than a win was rewarding. I think my problem with it is more in a wider sense. When Ole got the job, even when he was caretaker, he started making some quite bold decisions about the players that he liked and how he wanted United to play. Like, it was really clear that he didn't fancy Lukaku. And whether you do or you don't agree with that, it showed that there was a particular way of playing and he wanted to play that particular way. Similarly, he started picking Jesse Lingard because even though he wasn't the quality of player that he wanted someone quick and fast playing at the top of midfield. But since then, he's actually become much more negative and much less ruthless. And what we're finding is he keeps playing it safe when he's got an opportunity, and he keeps going back to players like De Gea, Matic, Pogba. He knows they're going to let him down, and he knows aren't going to take him where he wants to go. So in terms of the little picture and what he did, I understand. In terms of the big picture, it's starting to become a bit frustrating, the unnecessary caution. But as I said at the beginning of this answer, if United beat Sheffield United on Thursday, there might be 5 points off the top. There might be 3 points off the top, I think, if there's a draw in the Liverpool-Spurs game. So they're actually in a pretty good position. The problem is whether they've got the ability and the moxie and the momentum to actually do anything about it.
Has Solskjaer got better at his job over the last couple of months?
I don't know about over the last couple of months, but you would definitely hope he'd got better at the job over the last couple of years, really. I mean, I remember reading an interview with Nemanja Matic during last season that said he was a miles better manager now than he was then. I think what he has to do now is he has to settle on a way of playing, because that's the only way you're going to get the attacking and defensive cohesion that is required, and the team are going to be just performing in concert. At the moment, they don't really attack and defend like a team, because in every game the formation changes and the personnel change, and it's not possible to get the cohesion that you need, even under Fergie. When United won the league in 2007, they ended up getting battered in the Champions League semi-final by Milan, because basically the team were knackered and they had a lot of injuries. Now, and that is, to me, like, when I look at the time under Fergie, that's one of the European Cups that got away. I felt like United were the best team around that season, but by the time the end of the season came, they were spent, and they ended up limping over the line in the league and getting beaten in the cup final in a very low-key manner by Chelsea. So what happened that summer was Fergie went out and he bought Anderson and he bought Nani and he bought Owen Hargreaves. And then he had a squad that he could rotate. I'm not sure the cohesion was ever the same in the next 2 years and more of title winning, but it meant that they didn't tire at the end of the season and they were getting to European Cup finals. And that was with a great team. And what we're seeing with Ole is that he's changing a not great team, And they're not reproducing the cohesion that they have when there's a consistency of selection and he's picking his best players to go out and play. Now, this is a strange season, so you do need to do some level of rotation. But when you're rotating a handful of players every time and you're also rotating formation, that's not the best way of making it work. And it would be more sensible if you're rotating a couple of players and they're always playing the same way. And what the right way to play is obviously dependent on how you think United should play. For my part, I think that the best way of maximising the strengths and minimising the weaknesses is probably a diamond, because I don't think they've got the wide players to play 4-3-3, and they also need to protect the defence. So if you play a diamond, you've got 4 narrow midfield players, which means you can play 2 attacking midfield players with 2 strikers and have 2 players who are going to help you protect what you know to be a dodgy defence. So if I were him, which I'm not, for the avoidance of doubt, I would settle on that way of playing and then just get on with it and rotate 2, maximum 3 players in and out every game. But every game, unless it was a very special occasion, the players would know how they were going to be playing and what was expected of them.
Last question on this, because Mino Raiola, funny enough, talking again, says to Tudor Sport, when it comes to in England, they are sensitive, perhaps too sensitive. In January, the big players hardly move. Then in the summer, let's see what happens. So Pogba's sticking around on his way out, but sticking around until summertime. It looks like almost guaranteed at this point. You play him as often as you possibly can, because he needs to play well and he needs to boost his value, and he needs to, this now becomes where it's mutually beneficial for him to play well.
I think, yeah, like you would expect Pogba to, if he was getting picked, to play, but the kind of player that Pogba isn't going to change. So you're going to have some all right performances, the occasional really good performance, and some absolutely terrible performances. There's nothing has changed in what Raiola has said that's going to alter the person that Paul Pogba is. And it's not just about the player that he is, because the player that he is a reflection of the person that he is. And he doesn't come across as someone who loves competing at professional football. He loves football. I'm absolutely sure he loves football, and he loves training, and he's in unbelievable shape all the time. So I'm not saying that Paul Pogba but Paul Pogba's put in an unbelievable amount of work to be the footballer and athlete that Paul Pogba is, but he lacks the intensity to be someone you can rely on every week in the kind of team that United are. So if United keep picking him, they're just going to see more of the same. If you went and put Pogba in a perfect team where he was just the guy who was going to do the occasional brilliant thing, then that would be great. And Paul Pogba would be great in that aspect, but United need more from him than that. And so if they keep picking him, they're going to keep having the same complaints. He's played all right in the last couple of games. He played all right when he came on against Leipzig, and he played all right against City. Like not well enough, but he played okay. But there's no reason to think that now he realises he might have to, in order to earn the move that he wants, that may or may not be available in January, it's better for him if he's playing to get a better deal. I don't think that is going to flick a switch in Paul Pogba, because none of the other things have flicked a switch in Paul Pogba. It's just who Paul Pogba is. And I don't think that is particularly suitable for what United are trying to get to at the moment.
Okay.
So I would much rather see more of Donny van de Beek. And maybe Donny van de Beek isn't either, but at least we don't know. Whereas we know with Pogba. Yeah. We know that United can't build with Pogba, and we know that
he's on his way out as well. Yeah, good stuff. Daniel Harris, thanks a million. Cheers.
See you again, lads. Bye.
4 minutes past 8 this morning here on OTB AM. Still to come, Matt Williams is going to join us this hour. We'll be chatting to Kieran J. Walsh about The Racer, the new movie that's out. Up next, we've got Tuesday's sports pages.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio. Bet smart this season with stat betting on the Boyle Sports app. Bet on shots, shots on target, tackles, passes, assists and more, all powered by Opta. Plus, put your feet up and cheer your bets home with free live streaming on every UK and Irish horse race. Why not check out the hottest action on the biggest sporting events right now on the Boyle Sports app. Boyle Sports. This is betting. Need help? Contact gamblingcare.ie. 18+.
This Saturday panel on OTB.
I've watched a few of The Last Dance, mostly sports. I just find it fascinating. You're never satisfied with what he did. And I think anybody watching it, young kids watching it, whatever sports they're in, to see the attitude that he had and his approach to his profession was absolutely brilliant.
Don't miss the panel every Saturday afternoon on OTB Sports Radio. Tune in 24/7 on the OTB